talking creepypasta. This is a 2023, I guess, anthology movie with a variety of directors and writers and things like this. I believe this was a Screenbox movie. And effectively, what is a creepypasta, in case you don't know? It is a scary internet story, and they actually say that specific phrase in this movie. So it has a kind of wraparound. It's essentially an anthology film. We have this kind of overreaching story where there is this guy seemingly trapped in this house which has got dead bodies in it, and there's stuff going on, and there's a computer there with a memory, like a USB drive, which has got a variety of videos on, and he has to kind of watch these videos in hope of getting out. And the videos, of course, are our stories. Now, the kind of feedback I've seen from this film so far has not been good, and I will understand why that is. I haven't really looked into too much of the details of what people think, but I kind of have my own thoughts on it. But genuinely, this is a hard movie to talk about in some ways, because there are aspects what I actually do think is well done, but there's one huge issue with this film. But let's talk about what I think works. Now, the framing of this story, as I say, you have this wraparound story where this guy is watching these videos. It's not the most interesting, but it's okay. It's a framing kind of story. It's relatively good. The set direction is quite interesting. It doesn't spend too long on it. The actual stories themselves are well produced, I would suggest. The actual kind of production value here, the budget, and just the kind of thing like set design, the kind of the variety of monsters are all pretty good. Now, what I would say is not like a typical anthology where you have 4 or 5 different sort of stories that all have their own kind of like little mini arc. These are more short vignettes. And they're kind of like, there's more of them, so to speak, and they're very short, or quite short. But what I would say the plus side, as I say, is visually speaking, there's some well done stuff. You know, there's some pretty good kind of like scares, some pretty good kind of like creature effects. There's some quite nice kind of spooky imagery here. And, you know, you can imagine if these sequences had been sort of plucked out of this film and then were kind of a scary sequence within a kind of a normal kind of narrative, that would be a pretty good payoff. Because they are quite well done. And you know, things like the cinematography, for example, on some of these projects are quite impressive. And I was kind of watching this and thinking, you know, that's actually a really, you know, well done kind of shot. It looks pretty good. And, you know, just on a technical level, I gotta say, I thought this was well done for the most part. I mean, obviously it's an anthology with different people involved, so you know it's a variable. But for the most part, I have to say, it's on the basis of like what we're looking at as a craft. I gotta say, I thought it was impressive, and there is some interesting kind of like ideas. If I had to say the strongest out of these kind of little vignettes is one. Truly, the last of the kind of these standalone stories is where this kind of girl goes to this house where she's looking after this young boy, and you know, this young boy is kind of scared that there's this thing called lucuco, which is this kind of I believe like a Mexican style of spirit which is possibly going to eat her, and she's like just thinks it's this kind of kid's imagination. And of course, this being a horror movie, there's you know, there's a bit more to it, but there's also a little bit of a twist in that one. That was the strongest at the movies, I would say, because it actually had an arc, it actually had a little bit of story in it, and it had the most dialogue, I would suggest, out of all of the kind of the vignettes as well. And that may give you a hint of where this movie, what I'm going to say, where it went wrong, because the whole point of a creepypasta is a scary internet story. Story being the key word here, and that is what is missing from this movie, is story. Yes, the visuals look pretty cool. There are some good set pieces, there's some creepy monsters, you know, some kind of like good horror imagery, but it is really lacking on story. It's effectively a bunch of vignettes where someone is getting attacked by something, and that's kind of it. There's no real story in most of these little vignettes, and that is, it ultimately makes it look like a compilation video of films you've never heard of with kind of like bad stuff happening to people. That's kind of what it is. And visually, it's well done, as I say, but there's just no through line. There's no, well, I said, there's very little dialogue in this movie. Again, so we're not connecting to characters because we don't really see them as characters. They're just scenes of a lot of the time with no dialogue, but very little when there is. The only one, as I say, that I think is the kind of like the bucks action is the very last story. But for the most part, you don't connect with the characters because they're not characters. There's just no emotional connection to them because there's just nothing there. And they're short, so all we get is the kind of like, oh, someone's running away from something and something gets them. That's basically it, and it's the same kind of, well, the same type of story, just repeated with different kind of aesthetics. The actual kind of wraparound story, which probably gets the most airtime, is, you know, it has this kind of voiceover, because again, there's not a lot of actual dialogue, and I suspect this kind of like narration, so to speak, was added after the fact, but they think, well, there's not really much dialogue in this movie, so we have to add this kind of like narration over it. And, but it's, again, it's just this, it's not a particularly kind of a involving story, shall we say, that one. So it's really kind of hard to kind of say this, how to judge this movie, because I do think, as it presents as a visual style, there is some good stuff here. But what it's really lacking is substance. So, you know, it's fine if you just want to watch some scary imagery, and that's it. But if you want to be invested in a story, or B, characters, you can forget about it, because there's neither here for the most part, which is a real shame. And like I said, I think some of the kind of the scene setup, the way these kind of scenes are played out, are good. It just needs to be in a film which has a story around it, which is not this one. Now, I don't think this is like a 1 out of 10, like I've seen a lot of the reviews give this, because I do think there is some, you know, on a visual speaking at least, some good kind of talent on display, so to speak. But it's certainly not a good movie, because the narrative in it is so weak. And like I said, it being called a creepypasta, scary internet story, seems kind of like a bad choice of title, if I'm honest. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10, and the plus points, as I say, are for the visual kind of style and things that we see on screen. But it's a story, guys. It's a movie. It ultimately is dull because there's nothing to connect you. So 4 out of 10. Have you seen this? What did you think of it? If you did have seen it, please do let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.